So we're coming to the end of the program today with another great guest. And he says something like this: every piece of content has to satisfy a certain user need, but many newsrooms tend to produce wrong kind of content. This can be changed, but why and how? I hope that he can answer at least some of those questions with us today. Please welcome here Dimitry Shiskin he's the founder of BBC Userneeds. Thank you, Dimitry.
Thank you so much
for coming to us today.
And hi.
Yeah. So what's the topic of your engagement with us today?
Well, I'm just glad that I arrived from Copenhagen and then from Odense like 5 minutes ago.
Exactly,
so
we're just rushing you into the stage, yeah.
But some people have already sent me a few pictures from your big screen, so you already know about user needs a lot, so I don't need to be here in the first place, because you already know. But hopefully I will be able to talk more about it.
Oh, great. You know what? The stage is yours. Take it away.
Thank you. Right. Hi, I'm Dimitry, I'm from London, and I have been thinking about content on the one hand, product on the other hand, data on the third hand, and how they all fit together. And I'm here to talk about some of the kind of latest thinking about the user needs, because it has been with us, it has been with us, with our sector for the last maybe 5 or 6 years, but obviously the situation has moved on, and we are now developing it not only for news, but we are in the process of developing it for sport, because obviously sport has a different type of user needs than to news. I actually had a really interesting conversation with somebody about food specifically. Imagine creating a user need for food content specifically, and so on and so forth. So we'll talk about we'll talk about 20 seconds about me first. So I'm a journalist by profession, and I always calm everybody down by saying that I'm never leaving the editorial conversation, right? So it's always about editorial conversation. I'm not your consultant who is doesn't really know about the business. I have been the editor all my life, and I have been actually working with news, but I also have, when I left the BBC after about 20 years at the BBC, I went to at that time, the biggest travel content publication in the world, Culture Trip, and I have been consulting independently for about 3 years now, 2.5. And I really am proud that I have been collecting and evangelizing and in some cases enforcing the user needs model in publishing. And the result of our work together with Smart Doctor, who you heard from Eric this morning, is the updated version of the user needs model, because the one that BBC has suggested about, 5, 6 years ago is outdated, and we really need to be moving forward with it. So the only important thing I really need to remember you need to remember from my talk today is this slide. Majority of media organizations are not able to sit between the intersection of those two things, between focus and quality. If you get 20 people from, say, C-level people from a big media organization, you sit them down, you give them an empty piece of paper, and you ask them to write a purpose of organization in one sentence, the focus. They all will describe their media organization slightly differently. If they describe it slightly differently, then they talk to their members, managers slightly differently, and basically organization talks about its purpose slightly differently. They can't really push to the same direction. So my question is, are you sure that you are actually operating between those two axes, focus and quality? Because on digital, there is infinite number of things to satisfy your audience with. So there is infinite number of time of being focused, but the problem is, majority of newsrooms, not a lot of newsrooms can maintain that focus all the time, and not all newsrooms actually provide the best possible quality. And my friends at Smart Doctor actually posed the question to everybody. They're asking $1 million question. What will happen to the lives of your audience if you were to disappear tomorrow? Like, it's a really sobering question, because a lot of people think that we are pushing our content is really important, we are a part of democratic society and everything else. Yes, it's all well, but the honest truth is that a lot of content is not needed. A lot of content is overproduced, and the question is why? Because people are not able to focus properly. And everybody knows the design process, everybody is so already, they understand how to, before testing, they prototype, before prototyping, they ideate. they empathize with their users, and that's where the user needs come along. So the question is that you don't really retroactively fit the user needs to your coverage, you start with it. Because that's how you are different from each other. That's how you really are differentiating yourself. And everybody knows that slide from 2017. BBC hypothesized that there are 6 reasons for people consume news. We don't believe that this is true anymore, that you go to people's front pages, you actually see some of the content that satisfies some other user needs there. And actually, believe it or not, that this is a printout, and this is how the original model looked like, and this is the actual printout and the actual photograph of the user needs printout that I had, and I visited all those places around the world actually explaining to journalists why this is important, and that's why you see all the coffee mug stains and all the rest of it, because I was just opening it up and closing it up so much. But ultimately, you have heard many times today, people produce wrong type of content. This is what we have learned in 2017. 3,743 articles were created in the Update Me format. Update Me actually is the least popular user need out of all of them at that time for that particular newsroom. That's fine. The trouble is that once I have started consulting, and I consult companies on a local, regional, national, niche level, international level, they all have the same type of problems. They are producing wrong type of content in wrong quantities for the wrong audience. Wrong type of content, wrong volumes for wrong audiences. So, and also remember that if you look at the 100% of internet, news is probably about 2%, okay? So people actually have other more important things to do rather than consume news on the internet, right? So the question is, how do you position yourself so what you produce is so important to people that they will treat it in the same way they treat Spotify, in the same way they treat Netflix, in the same way they treat, I don't know, Amazon or something like that. Like, what is it that you can produce that they cannot live without, okay? So that's why we have come up with a new idea of the new user needs model with, Eric must have already shared it with you, but maybe he left it for me. But there are 4 reasons that people consume news overall, and there are 8 user needs within those 4 reasons. So people want to know something, people want to understand something, people want to feel something, and people want to do something. And the area with the doing axis, this one, the action-driven axis, the green one, actually didn't exist several years ago. People just didn't think that service journalism was a thing. But you go on BBC front page, you go to the Guardian front page, and you suddenly see articles that actually don't inform of anything, but actually help people with their day-to-day lives. And it's really, really important, because when I sometimes talk to people, I say, why, as a chief content officer of Culture Trip, I was writing about, say, Odense or Copenhagen, and I was writing like 50, 60 articles about it, and all traffic was coming to me, not to you. Question is why? Like, why are you actually allowing other people to actually talk about things that really can make a difference in people's life? I don't know. So there are 8 user needs overall. So Update Me stays the same, Educate Me and Give Me Perspective in the contextual axis stay the same, Divert Me and Inspire Me stay the same. We have renamed Keep Me on Trend user need, because Keep Me on Trend user need was all about what do people on social media say about something that has happened. We thought that this was way too narrow definition of how we should be treating that user need. And people really want to have that water cool moment, and they want to discuss something from news. They want to have an opportunity to understand what radio people say about news, what TV people say about news, what kind of documentary. Maybe yesterday there was an interesting documentary, everybody talks about it, and it's not really Update Me user need, but we call it Keep Me Engaged user need. And actually, it's not a secret, but the Keep Me Engaged name was suggested by ChatGPT, because we really were unable to come up with this idea of how to call this user need, and we explained to ChatGPT what we mean, and it came with this idea, and we have a photograph of all 4 of us basically kind of bursting out laughing, because it basically has described exactly what we meant, and we couldn't come up with it ourselves. However, when it comes to the action-driven user need, you have 2 really important user needs. One of them is Help Me, another one is Connect Me. So Help Me is all about how you as a media organization can help me with my life. So that's why media organizations started producing things like how to save money on fuel, how to cook better, more equally nutritious but more cheaper meal, for example, So help me articles are very, very important for the audience. And the second one is connect me. Connect me user need is something which we can't ignore. People want to feel that they are contributing to society as well. So this is about, you help me with my life, with help me articles, but also connect me with other people who are like-minded about something, about anything. So you can write an update me article about how, say, a local river is being cleaned up, for example, But you also can write a connect me article about how you can actually join other people to actually clean up that river or something like that. So this perception of being part of something bigger than yourself is really important to people. And you really need to be creating that content as well. So King Charles has been crowned fairly recently, so we actually put together just some examples of how we can actually bring it to life a little bit. So the same article, the same topic, created via 8 user needs at the same time. So update me your complete guide for the day or your essential guide to the weekend. Keep me engaged, the angle about how to actually get to London during that time if you want to visit London, and there is an article about the rail strikes. When it comes to the contextual user need, you can write, instead of updating people about the fact that coronation is happening, you can actually lead your website with, he's the king of 15 countries, but how much longer? Or Give Me Perspective article will be about why I will not be watching a coronation. And that's also a fair thing to actually lead your website with. You don't necessarily need to update people all the time. You actually can bring a completely different angle on it. When it comes to Inspire Me is about connecting people and it's about making them feel proud of humanity, making them feel proud of being part of a human race. I'm not saying that specifically with Camilla it serves that purpose, but with Camilla specifically here, you read that article, you read that headline, you understand that you're about to read an Inspire Me article. This was her story, how she went from a tabloid queen to an actual queen. And Divert Me is a really interesting user need. Divert Me is about lighter take on the same subject. You can't write about the same subject in a serious manner. You can actually find lighter angles on it. For example, I'm not interested in reading about the coronation, but I'm actually interested in looking at the 360 degrees view of the cathedral itself. And lastly, as I said, help people. What will be the weather like for the weekend? How do I watch, I don't know, Roma against, who are they playing? Sevilla, I think, tonight, right? So how can I watch coronation? All of those articles. Or Connect Me, alternative guide to the coronation. I'm not interested in coronation. Guardian, actually, several years ago, when William married Catherine, they had a button on the front page to remove all of the royal stories away from the front page. And it was a button saying, actually take me to a Republican Guardian. Actually, don't show me some of the stories. I'm not interested. And that's why alternative guide to the coronation is a super interesting example of the Connect Me user needs. So my question to you is that, do you talk about those audience user needs before the story is commissioned? Do you actually talk to your news gatherers, to your correspondents? Bring me a Educate Me story today and write me an Inspire Me story on Friday about the same subject, for example. So we never leave the conversation about editorial, as I said. It's not about the topics. You are the masters of the journalism. You understand your topics better than everybody else. And what do I know, right? I consult across the world and I cannot be expert on everything. But that's why the topics you choose, your prerogative. I'm only talking about how to actually do those topics more effectively. And when I started with user needs in 2016, only the BBC was doing user needs. Well, a little bit of BuzzFeed as well. BuzzFeed had their own model. And these are all the companies that actually have experimented with the user needs so far. It's quite impressive. And I was actually going through the New York Times investment deck last year. And obviously my jaw just dropped on the floor because I saw 2 slides which basically described user needs for New York Times. And I was like, oh my God, even New York Times has it. And then suddenly Nick Newman, so Nick and I were sitting having lunch just before Christmas. And he didn't tell me that he was about to include user needs model in his predictions and trends report for 2023. It was such an such an important thing to learn because, again, from something that we have started at the BBC in 2016, for this to become a trend in the sector, it was really, really rewarding. When you download our white paper on user needs, you can see that we have looked at 3 important metrics. And this is, I was just peeling potatoes yesterday, so don't worry about that. 3 metrics that are important for everybody, reach, engagement, conversion. So all of those 3 metrics change positively when you start looking at them through the lens of user needs. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but you will be able to see it in the white paper. The blue lines are the number of median page views per user need. Red dot is the, orange dot is the number of articles created. So clearly you can see that keep me up to date for this brand number 3. They're overproducing keep up to date, but they are not producing help me out articles at all. They're not producing a lot of them. So question is why? Why not? So obviously reach is changing. When it comes to engagement, this is a slide about engagement. The same thing. Once you start analyzing your content via user needs, you can actually see that some user needs are much better in engaging people rather than just update me articles. And the third one is conversion. Everybody is interested in conversion. Conversion can be whatever you want it to be. It can be subscribe to an email, or it can be a, I don't know, become a member or something. But once you start, some user needs are converting people better than update me. Again, the question is why you're not thinking about this in that way. And this is the second most important slide of today. You go back to your, if there are chief product officers in the room, if there are people who are responsible for content management systems, question is, when you publish an individual article, do people manually or maybe using AI add those 3 variables for every URL? Because everybody is able to say that business does better than sport or sport does better than entertainment. That's like 20 years ago type of insight. But once you start collecting those 3 things and compare them between each other, once you start saying that actually a business story created in a first-person account in an educate me format converts people 3 times better than a business story created as an update me user need in a text format, for example, nobody's thinking like that. But I'm thinking like if you start selecting formats, selecting topics, which you already do, and selecting user needs for every single URL, then suddenly you have amazing insights. So you always start with strategy first, then you go and understand, because of your strategy, what you want to achieve. These are the user needs that we're going to satisfy. Only then you go into the topics, and only then you go into formats. Because the problem with journalists generally is that they jump into formats all the time. Remember when interactive maps were a thing. Somebody who wanted to impress you in the morning meeting, they would come and say, let's do an interactive map about something. They don't understand anything about interactive maps. They don't understand how long it takes. They don't understand that what is the release cycle, for example. They just want an interactive map. So the question is, before you go into formats, think about actually what are you trying to achieve here. And this is important. This is really important because this basically is a invitation to act. So you start with content strategy, and the point is that people inside media organizations don't really talk to each other or sometimes don't really share the same values. For example, chief product officer, editor-in-chief, and chief data officer, they all come into a conversation from a different angle. But if you put them in the room and you say that both editorial data and product activities are equally important for this, and user needs is probably the most interesting angle through which to connect those 3 disciplines. So you start with content strategy, and maybe you involve data people and editorial people. You go in, you select a taxonomy of tags, you involve product. You involve analytics, you start measuring it, and that this is between data and product. And then you create hypothesis and create analysis about your coverage. And again, all 3 types of organizational structures are taking part in this. And normally, when you create type of analysis, this is just an analysis from one website, which we did a couple of years ago. But the point still stands. I probably will be surprised not to see 3 or 4 actionable takeaways when you start analyzing your content based on user needs, formats, and topics at the same time. Like, for example, you can find out that educate me is the least used user need by your organization, but it actually has the highest percentage of loyal users. It's a really important message for sales, for example. So you can actually go to sales and say, start pitching your own website, start selling it differently. Because actually, we can sell educate me content together as a package. We can create a new product, for example, like a newsletter, and we can sell it as well. Because we know that educate me user need has the highest percentage of loyal readers. And so on and so forth. Even yesterday, we were doing some review of some site, and there were like 3 or 4 actionable things that they can immediately either hypothesize about or actually go into action. And that's why I like working with, the reason why I like working with SmartOcto, not because they're the best tool in the market, but I brought Chartbeat into the BBC, so I'm not biased here, right? So I actually know a lot about this area of editorial analytics, but who can actually show me, this is the reason why I don't like dashboards. Dashboards are, they were cool 5 years ago, they were cool 10 years ago, but you can make me an argument with a dashboard, I can disprove your argument in 10 minutes, because the situation will change. Once you start looking at the cohort of articles performance, not based on topics, but based on everything else, you will find out those things. Educate me content, 461 articles produced. Update me content, probably double that, but actually, article reads average is 988 for educate me and 312 for update me. Once you start actually looking at this through, not only through reach perspective, but as I said, through conversion perspective or through engagement perspective, this becomes really important to you. And this is probably this slide that basically talks about itself by itself. So this is a quadrant model. You've got pure win articles, you've got niche articles, you've got reach champions, you've got substandard articles. Obviously, no question here that what this green color is. The green color, of course, is update me, right? So people are overproducing update me stories, and no wonder that in pure wins you've got less green colors, right? So the question is, audience tells you what kind of articles it prefers. And again, it's not about writing about Kardashians all the time, because you can write about serious things, but you can write about it not through the update me angle, but from some other angles as well. And again, we looked at this underperforming website, we looked at the substandard articles, and 75% of them were update me. So no question here. I guess I will leave you with just one thought. And all 3 adjectives in this phrase are important. If you satisfy your audience content needs creatively, so you still need to have a conversation about about your creativity. Like, the best exercise I have with people is when I give them an update me article and ask them to think about it for 10 minutes and bring me 20 versions of the same article, but told through other user needs. And editors become like children in kindergarten, because they love that type of stories, right? They love creating things. So satisfying user needs creatively is very important. And I also say that throw away the first 3 ideas which you have, because they are lazy and they have already been tried by somebody else, right? So they kind of throw them away and start again. You need to do it consistently, because why? You will not see the impact of user needs probably before the first 6 months. Probably even before the whole year, depending on your output. But like I, for example, just yesterday had a call with a big Latin American publisher who I helped bring in user needs for one of their verticals. 2.5 years ago, they were my first clients. And they suddenly now say that another big vertical wants to be involved, and another vertical wants to be involved. And they, unlike others, they actually introduce user needs as a drop-down menu into their CMS, so they actually assign user need for every story they publish. So they can do that type of analysis all the time. And strategically, right? So you need to be comfortable by saying, like, for example, another of my client, a unashamedly third read type of publication, The Conversation. So they are based on only promoting kind of cover the day's agenda only through the eyes of academia. So what do people who know really think about something that is happening? And they only selected 4 user needs, and they decided that we're not going to be updating people, because they already have Guardian to do it, and BBC to do it, and New York Times to do it. So they said, actually, people who come to us, they only want to be motivated to do something about it, or they want to be given perspective on a particular topic. And that's also fine. So thank you very much. I just want to add that I like to be here, A, and B, we still have, 10 minutes for questions, if you have. And I'm here until tomorrow morning, so if you want to have a discussion about this, I don't have any plans anymore. So, I'm just super happy that I made that the train from Copenhagen to Odense was on time and everything was fine. So thank you.
That's good. That's fine. You know, the audience here come from different perspectives. I mean, some of them maybe are engaged in, it could be radio, it could be SoMe, it could be television, it could be, I mean, do you see any distinguished for each branch of these, or is it the same on the full scale?
So off the back of one of my work, I had a piece of work with a particular organization, and their lead of their TV news actually came to me separately and said, you know what, we were not invited to this, I invited myself, but I'm going to move all my TV operation to this model now. So they initially think, well, maybe, I know, for example, when I showed you some of the people that work with user needs, there is one particular organization that is a collection of radio stations, and they have moved their coverage, or at least their podcast coverage, on satisfying user needs. So I think ultimately it's about, as you said at the introduction, every single piece of content does something for the audience.
So this could be, for all of us, what you're saying to us today.
Well, that's why I started by saying that if you are interested in creating a content user need for a model for business, or for food, or for, I don't know, for personal finance, for example, you can. You can, because ultimately it's about, it's moving away from this vision of I know better because I'm an editor and I will show them now and I will impress other editors. But you actually become humble about this and you say, actually, I want to hear what my, like, when we brought Harken into the BBC, and Harken is this new, well, not new anymore, but it's a media startup from America which allows you to basically source people's reaction to certain things. And BBC correspondent for health was publicly quoted as saying, it would never have occurred to me to write a story about X, what I have been asked, because it was never in my brain to even think that people would find that interesting, right? So you really need to be in that frame of mind all the time. You really need to basically think, I don't know best. I actually will let my audience know best. You go to the website called answerthepublic.com, and there are 100 questions, most frequently asked questions about, in any language, about every single area of the world. Those 100 questions, those are 100 articles that you can write easily.
Yeah. And Dimitry, I know everything is processing. I mean, now we are at one state of mind, but maybe in 2 months it's another situation. We changed. The world is changing. So can we? How often do we need to do this exercise? Is it once a year? Is it every second year? What would be?
I probably will rephrase that question by saying, don't worry about what will happen in 3 years' time. Think about the most important thing is that you are probably not doing something correctly. Try it, but don't try to do it across the whole website as a whole. Maybe try it on one vertical, but always start the change project with your CEO kind of demonstrably, publicly supporting you. Because your change will never happen, it will never bed down if your leaders are lukewarm about something like that. So, like the way I was always saying things like to Deutsche Welle, to France Media Monde, to Radio Liberty, the reason why we never considered them our competitors at the BBC, because they never had a visionary leader who basically said to us that this is how we're going to do it. It will take us 5 years, but we're going to do it. And those organizations never had those people who basically are, as I said, unashamedly pro this.
What happens, Dimitry, if we don't take this step? I mean, what happens to our relationship to the audience?
Well, it starts to plateau, firstly. Like, if you ask yourself, like, why is, like, I had a client earlier this year who said that there was nothing changing in their output for one particular vertical for across maybe a couple of years. So in 2 years' time, they basically were like that. And the question is, well, that vertical is a sports vertical, and sports is very, very driven by the events, right? So Olympics is big, World Cup is big, like we know that. But what do you do in quieter months? Maybe this is the time to actually start introducing content that satisfies some of the user needs in quieter months, not in a big month, because in big months, update me will be important, yes. But you also, well, with sport, we have found out, for example, when you start looking at the user needs, specific user needs and specific sports, we actually started seeing lots of interesting combinations there. Like, for example, skiing and inspire me, or tennis and help me, for example. You know, there is a lot of potential there as well.
Yeah, because I was originally in the television business, but there are different departments. You have the sport, you have the politics, you have economic, financial parts. So we could start one place, do the best of this exercise, and then multiply it on a full scale.
Even, in fact, when I was working with this sports company, they specifically wanted me to work with sport because they knew that their politics editor was basically not playing ball with them. So he was like super in his own head, and he didn't want to play ball with them. So we said, why don't we do 3 months of sport, and we then show some of the results to all of them, and then see what happens. And immediately, as we showed that results, both sport and both sports, politics, entertainment, and a couple of others basically said, I want that as well.
Yeah, but couldn't you have I mean, some needs might be in the sport department, but it's not the same needs as the financial part of your reporting. I mean, could there not be a difference between the user needs?
That's why you need to treat every single vertical of your website as separate. And you can't really have... I always say that the averages, they really kill the story here, because they basically, it's the same thing as, you know, the phrase average temperature in the hospital, right? So you can have all of the people in the hospital, you can take average temperature from them. It doesn't really tell you anything, because it will not tell you a story about 1,000 people who are in the hospital. So once you start actually going into verticals specifically, because they can think about your vertical on sport can have different user needs that, as you said, vertical on business and so on and so forth. So you specialize
in each department, you will get maybe the best results.
The overlap will be quite high, but I would probably discourage people from basically say that we have you might say that, you know, our drop-down menu will consist of maybe a collection of user needs for some other departments at the same time, and there will be overlap, but you won't be able to actually know before trying it.
Okay. Do anyone of you have a question? Juan, you have a question?
This is Juan from the Spanish Football League. The other day I read an article about user needs and behavioral targeting, and I want to know your opinion. It says that inspire me content works better at the beginning of the week because we all need inspiration. Towards when the weekend is approaching, educate me works better because you want to hang out and to have a conversation and to raise conversations with your friends. And in the weekend, entertain me kind of content works better. Do you have any insight on this? Like time frame during the week and which kind of user need works better?
So 2 examples. One example is that, for example, BBC started alerting people. They changed their breaking news policy because they started involving non-update me stories in their breaking news notifications on their app, for example. So they started creating things like inspire me stories or educate me stories as part of their notification strategy. So that's answer number 1. Answer number 2 is that every single organization will be completely different because I would say that, for example, you read New York Times morning briefing, a morning newsletter which they write, and they always have a long read inside it. And the question is why they have a long read. I don't have time to read a long read from Monday to Friday. That's why they have another product called Weekender, where their editors select 10 of the best articles throughout the week and they package it differently. So I think that we are A, overproducing, B, under-promoting stuff that has already been done. And I totally get you with sport, the velocity of content is very, very high. But all I'm saying is that you probably are dealing with people who are already very much engaged. All I'm saying is that there are user needs which you are probably underutilizing, that you are basically a one-trick pony, you are updating, but actually if you start creating and packaging things differently, it's quite interesting. So I would say that try it for yourself. Don't come up with your own model. Take the generic one which we have created, because I would be very surprised if you will show me a user need which I have not come across before. And you can show me something, but it will sit under those 8 which I have shown to you before. And then do maybe an analysis of between 3 and 6 months of your content. You will be surprised what you will learn.
No, that's a good one. Another question from the gentleman here.
Hi, Dimitry. Adam from Next Edition. You're talking about user needs. It's interesting, fascinating to understand. I've never heard of this before. I'm looking at it, if I turn it slightly sideways and look at it third dimensional, there's also generational needs. Like the millennials, they want the short version of the update me, and the boomers, they want the long version. I'm just wondering about how you would take that into account.
So, 2 things. Firstly, I would say that I compared specifically a new model with the Smart Doctor and I have put together against a report about Generation Z behavior and news consumption. The overlap was practically 100%. So they didn't use those words, and nobody uses those words when you are a member of the audience. This is kind of the marketers on top of the user needs, as it were. But what you're saying is that I would challenge the idea that boomers want longer, because we know from when what's it called? The Quartz was launched. Remember Quartz? This American very cool publication which basically kind of fizzled out. They came up with this idea that people want either very short articles or very long articles. They don't want something in between. What was the BBC way of covering stories? Exactly in between. Like exactly the wrong type of content. But everybody, so it's very hard to change culture. But I was digital editor for 41 different language sites at the BBC, and I know that you don't really barge in and kind of blow things up again. So you kind of methodically, you give yourself time. You won't achieve a lot with this quickly, but 2 years, couple of years, maybe 1.5 years, you will. But so answering your question, I wouldn't worry about the generational thing, because I think it's probably just a little bit overhyped, just in terms of like, be helpful to your audience firstly, and then everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. Morten?
Hi, Dimitry. My name is Morten. You and
Hello,
I know each other.
Yeah.
And as you know, I care a lot about audience engagement, and I'm very much a fan of your model, but I also think, if I want to critique it, I think I would say that it's very much like a consumer perspective on the users.
Yeah.
And I know Tao from Zetland talked about your model earlier, and they're talking about members, like people wanting to be part of a community. So if we were talking about more subtle kinds of needs, that would be, for example, make me belong, maybe make me be part of a better conversation than at other places, make me, or help me be sure that I can trust you, you know, that kind of subtle needs. How you put that into
So
your
you
model?
answered your question, because you, by the way you described your user needs, you already cross-referenced some of the user needs from the model, right? So help me and help me can be different from this particular user need. It can be either help me with my life, or like the Bureau for Investigative Journalism. I was talking to Rosina, the editor-in-chief and CEO, and she said to me, we only use 4 user needs, and one of them is about show me how you got to where you got. So show me the inner workings. And a part of the user needs model for sport, a really important user need for sport is, and Athletic is using it all the time, it's about show me the inside of how this match was won. So like, show me the inside of something. So that's quite interesting. I completely agree with you. It's much more nuanced on the level of each organization. So that's why what I'm saying here is that of the totality of media organizations who have not heard about this approach, you still have a lot of work to do. But those advanced organizations, they can go much deeper in those things and say, well, actually, like my one example, you take Vox. So Vox is unashamedly context access user need, right? But they can't say that we're only about educate me and give me perspective. They have a model with 6 user needs that all sit under give me perspective and educate me. But those 6, they all ladder up into educate me and give me perspective, but they still have 6 individual ones. And so that there is nothing wrong with actually going much deeper than that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, another question?
Hello, thank you. So I was wondering, this great model here, you also talked about being from the TV world. Do you have a model that also maybe works for, how would it work in a TV content, or music, or books?
Well,
is this sort of a content that can
I
broaden
would,
out?
I would love to do a musical user need model. That's why I'm so excited about potentially creating a food one. And I was so excited to actually start working on the sports one, because I think that somebody actually got in touch with me recently and said, I want to, like when I was hired by Culture Trip from the BBC, they hired me because they liked the idea of user needs, and they basically let me develop a structure for 3 very specific travel-related user needs. People want to be inspired to go somewhere, people want to be helped with orientation around the place where they go, and people want to be helped with bookings, to help with the business model. So only 3 user needs, nothing else was commissioned. You know, either the piece was inspiring, or the piece was orientational, or the piece was helping people to book something. So the same thing goes with others, but I would love to understand what media, for example, music user need model is about, because I would imagine that whilst the overlap will be there, there still will be 2 or 3 user needs which are specifically musical. Like I was really excited to see a sports user need model having one particular user need sitting underneath of the contextual, emotional one, make me feel nostalgic. So I remember when in 1999, Spartak Moscow defeated Arsenal in Moscow on Luzhniki Stadium with 89,000 people on the stands. I want to know what happened to every single member of that team. And that article, not only I will share, I will just publish it everywhere and send it to all my friends as well. So those types of things.
Great. Yeah, we have a question.
Hi, my name is Magnus from TV2 Denmark. Going on about from the last question, could you maybe give your thoughts on why we don't see more TV broadcasters applying the user needs model? My hunch is that it's because of the lack of good analytics. We don't have like story-by-story analytics. So, like, what would be your way of tracking this?
Plus, they're full of themselves as well, right? So they kind of, yeah. But I think that. Forward-looking organizations, they started creating their TV bulletins and radio bulletins based on Chartbeat data and Smart Talk to data and Parsley data. If you really are kind of wanting to push me, I would say, if you're still thinking, if a media organization is still thinking in terms of output for TV, for radio, for online, you are 5 years behind. You really need to be thinking about, like for example, it took me a year to make sure one BBC outlet was completely interchangeable between output editors, senior producers, and producers. So they basically were having rota where 1 week was video, 1 week was online, 1 week was radio. And because of that, you suddenly have a completely flexible team. You give people a lot of internal growth, and you also don't, like I was managing editor for 2 years, I remember how ungrateful that job is, like because I really remember like shuddering looking at my phone because somebody was always ill about something. But once you have a team that is super flexible, you actually don't worry about it anymore. So I would say that we need to go into the video or whatever TV heavy conferences circuit for sure at some point of time. But if you talk to advanced organizations, you kind of see that they're news gatherers. They are completely format agnostic. Yes, the output leaders are format kind of centric, but the people who create content, they are really content agnostic.
Good. Yeah. One more question. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I tried to apply a very similar but very basic model on my LinkedIn, on my personal brand. Do you see this as well in influencers, celebrities, or only media organizations?
Well, you know, where does media stop and where does something else start, right? So you always need to ask yourself, what do you want this content to do to the people? And sometimes it's about explanation, sometimes it's about inspiration, sometimes it's about updating them about something. So you can do it as well. And you can actually extract all of your LinkedIn posts and see which ones are going better, but you need to have larger volumes. You have to have like a year long. So,
but do you see celebrities or like influential people on LinkedIn or Instagram where you see and realize, wow, this person is using this model or not that much?
So I don't really work with influencers a lot, but I know, for example, for a fact that the way media marketing organizations or agencies pose a task for an influencer that is serving a particular organization, they say, we need 100 TikToks that are all done in a certain way. You know, it can be an educate me content for 100 articles, or it can be an inspirational content for 100 articles. It would be amazing to do it together with somebody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, Dimitry, I think that was the last
Thank you.
question for this session. So thanks a lot for
Thank you very
joining
much.
us. Give him a hand.
Thank you
and
very
thank
much.
you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all of us for being here, for listening, for participating in this great sessions. Thank you, and I hope to see you tomorrow again.
You run.
See you. Bye.
You run. Good to see you.